You can tell from the pretty background in the bottom little footer there. You guys are my guinea pigs for practicing the session live. So quick agenda. You can assume what we're going with here. I wanted to talk about why we're looking at automation. What's the point? What were the driving factors that pushed my team and myself there? What are the kind of the tools we looked at? And then a concept, infrastructure as code. That's an important phrase to me, where I can extend the concept of a firewall or a router or a switch to a person that has no idea what that means, and just simple formatting of data, and then take action upon that, consume that by something, be it a Python script, be it an Ansible module, what have you, that can then go forth and configure that said item. And then everything is programmable. All the stuff is written in something. Most of it in Python, but like for example, like Ansible, they don't really care what it's written in as long as you're given the right return codes and you can receive the arguments. I did some in TCL, Perl. And that's all I remember anymore that I know. I'm sure you can do whatever language you want, but I don't know any languages beyond that. So who am I? I've been doing the Cisco thing for a while. Configured my first router back in '98, and then I'm like, oh, these firewalls are cool too. It's just a router that blocks stuff effectively. And then nothing new for me for a while. I just kind of perfected my craft. We'll say that. Worked my way through the ranks. Then I said, okay, something's happening. There's a shift. So I wanted to jump and learn the new data center technologies, the stuff that came from the Nuovo Systems guys from Cisco spin out, who also left Cisco now. But anyway, so jumped into the UCS and Nexus stuff and learned some VMware, looked at virtualization, and then took that next step a couple years later and said, well, I think this OpenStack thing is catching on. People need a way to deploy cloud besides throwing it on Amazon. And I looked at ACI, not really knowing what SDN was at that time. And then later moving into network programmability, which I guess is a subset of SDN, but I look at it in kind of its own animal, where you're just trying to deploy some action or some outcome through a method other than, to steal the phrase from some figure-defined networking, which is less than optimal. And I'm proof that an old dog can learn new tricks. So if you think that you've been doing this for too long and you can't make the transition, you're wrong. You can do it. It's interesting. It's fun. And if you're just getting started, like I said, this is an amazing opportunity. Because I don't want to say a huge chunk of what I've spent my life learning is irrelevant, but a good chunk of it is. Because there's been a major transition in the field in how we get things done. So let's jump into the particular motivation for my situation was, I had thousands of devices. I had several data centers, pretty large, with I guess the most was maybe 200 to 250 switches, and I didn't want to copy and paste a lot. And so my boss said, we're going to do 50 new data center deployments next year. We need you to automate this whole process. And so I was brought in to do that specifically, so I figured I better get on it, better learn what this means. And so I got to look at, okay, what are my requirements? What am I looking at? What's my problem statement? I've got lots of devices, lots of different operating systems. They're all Cisco, but they're all different. And then you got the security stuff, because at that time we didn't have anything worthwhile that had a Cisco label on it. And team was tiny, 6 people, like in there. That's what it felt like a giant router rolling over us, like in the end of like Indiana Jones or something. It's just like we were pushing that rock uphill, and I wanted to see how can we shrink that and make it easier. So, and excuse my attempt at wit, We needed a framework that was full of errors. I needed something efficient, repeatable, reusable, observable, revision controlled, and standard. So when I say that, I need something that it's got to save me time. If it's not saving me time, it's pointless. If I can't do the same task over and over and over, if I'm going to get different results, that's a problem. So the term idempotent, if you've heard it, it's I can run the same script 8 million times. It's going to come out with the same outcome each time. If it doesn't need to change anything, it's not going to change anything. So I need a smart script, not just some Perl I threw together and that just spews data at a SSH at some box. And then I want something that's reusable, something modular. I can create a chunk of code that I can, convert to something else to provide another feature set or another function. I need to get some feedback. I can't just send out a script expecting a hopeful outcome. I need some feedback to say, did it work? What was changed? And what's the state? When I say revision controlled, essentially something that you can you can throw it up on Garrett or GitHub, something like that. Something that fits inside of that version control system where I can make changes. I can have someone needs to plus to my work to get merged, for my code to get merged. Something that's going to go through the full configuration management stages. And it's standard, which is great from the perspective of I'm doing something that is I know I'm not alone. Everybody else has the same problem I've got. Maybe different levels, maybe different stuff, but generically we all have the same problem. We've got too much work to do and not enough time to do it. So I want to take advantage of the products that are out there, but not just a vendor's rendition of automation. Not to talk bad of my own company, but they've deployed a lot of automation suites that are pretty terrible. And I think that something that's open source driven, something that's community driven, has a lot more advantage and has a lot more opportunity for success. So where do we end up? We were looking at one of the specific solutions we were looking at was Ansible. Peter said he was going to be here, but apparently he didn't make the drive. But he gave me the okay to use this verbiage. I'm sorry?
It's a long drive from Durham.
Yeah. Well, he signed up. He said he was. I'm like, whatever, man.
Traffic was next.
Yeah. So, yeah, he's like, this is what you're allowed to put in your slide. I'm like, okay. He sent me to the PR guy. I'm like, all right, I'll make sure that I'm good. I'm not going to break any rules. And so you can read it. I'm not gonna. It's automation suite. It was a nice company, and then Red Hat snatched them up. Hopefully, it stays that way. And uses YAML form. We're going to talk about what that means. We're going to talk about. Let's see, anything else in there interesting? Another key function is that Ansible. It's Python underneath. So it's been living in the system world for quite some time. It's nothing new to your Linux engineers. They know what that is. So we can have a single infrastructure that we can all share, that we can all understand. I can even steal some of their knowledge when I'm stuck and having issues. I can go over to the Linux admin. When was the last time a router guy could go over to the Linux admin for help? Not very often. So that's a great way where we can pool up our resources and use something, a common footprint. For us, why did we choose it? Agentless was number one. You're doing Cisco stuff. I can't just create a little chunk of Python and SSH it over and run it. No, that's not going to happen. So, in our case, that was key for configuring a network device by Ansible. It's a little bit counterintuitive. You're not going to the remote host to run the code. You're running it locally and then taking advantage of some API, be it SSH, some REST API if they've got one, or whatever else is available. I'm trying to think. You can take advantage of netcom, whatever mechanism it is to get from the box that's running the playbook to the end devices. not as clean as it is in the Linux world, where I'm packaging up a little snippet of Python and dumping it on the other box to get ran, but it gets the job done. And like I said, the server team was already using Ansible, and in our case, they were using Ansible to deploy OpenStack. So there was a lot of complication there, so there was a lot of knowledge within our team that we were able to take advantage of. Back again, infrastructure as code, that's already kind of built into the concept of Ansible. You're using these variable files, which is in that YAML format, but that you can structure in a way that can represent your network in data, or not in data, in text, which is really key for extending the understanding of the network and its operation to folks that are network ignorant. It's pretty simple to use and learn. I picked it up in a couple of weeks. I was already writing modules. I was making things happen, creating playbooks, and yeah. So from start to finish, I guess about 4 weeks, I built a framework that would generate configs, deploy the configs, and do some validation at the end for an entire data center. And so what was a 3-day job turned into a half-an-hour job in just in a couple of weeks of effort of me, learning it from scratch, because I'm not the guy you want learning programming, at least not a year ago. So the ramp up is pretty quick. Like I said before, the reason to choose it was that community driven. It's open source, you can change whatever you need to, which was key for us. There's a lot of new stuff that's out there. There's modules that are baked into Ansible that will support network. That wasn't there before. There was all that beautiful Napalm stuff. That was just coming out. So it was very green and very raw and buggy. So we couldn't really rely on that either. So we had to really write a lot of our own modules that were deploying the code. But we were following a lot of the variable replacement modules that were key, just to build a config from a template, and I'll get to what I mean with that in a minute. And then another key is that you can leverage whatever programming language you understand underneath. So I'm now almost entirely Python, and if you ask me anything outside of that, you're going to get a Google response. You're going to see me typing. The guy who sits next to me, the guy at work, he is Perl all day, nothing but Perl, but we can collaborate just fine, because we can create our own modules and they can interoperate. We can have expected arguments to pass back and forth, and we're fine.
Are you releasing any of the modules that you've been using publicly, or are you keeping them all internal?
My favorite one I released a while back. It was it used the ASA REST API. And I'll get into that because it was my baby. I spent a good 3 weeks on that after the fact to represent ASA configuration in a YAML. So you can just say, hey, Scrum team that's delivering whatever application, you can fill this out. What goes to where, who talks to what ports. You can organize it in object groups and things like that in a way that makes sense to you as text. And I can then consume that, and it's done. We can use variables because we have this big, massive, awful way of determining our variables. Unfortunately, every data center was different, so we had to keep variable files for each data center. And we tried to cheat and say, well, we can do everything as offsets from the aggregate address range of that individual data center. And so it's this terribly ugly method of variable replacement, but it worked for us in that case. But you can stack these things on top of each other. You can use variable replacement on top of YAML consumption, on top of the automatic deployment of the configurations, all in the same playbook. And we can get onto it instead of just talking about it. All right, so let's see if I'm still connected. I don't remember what I was going to do here, but let's give it a try here. I think I had.
Is that on the
On which day?
ASA?
Yes. Turn them on, what's up there, that's later. Where was, should have done it while I was on this bigger screen, so I could see what I was doing. iOS example, there we go. So, actually before I do that, let me go to the webpage. Alright. Okay. So if you go to GitHub and you go to Ansible and you start looking at the modules that they have, you can see that there are actual network modules there for real networking stuff. You know, there's our Cumulus friends over there, but they're essentially a Linux box, so it's too easy. You can do almost anything with those things. Oh man. Here's where it gets ugly, the iOS stuff. And what you have here is a module that will take as arguments, you throw a command on there, show version, you can register the output, do something with that later, and, okay, wait for a certain response. I realize I'm going to go look at this page first, now that I'm there, I'm sorry, go back and forth. But here's the list of network modules on the Ansible page. So I'll kind of give you the gist of what they have and what can they do. So it runs arbitrary commands on iOS. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. So you need to essentially take a command as a string and send it. So this is not rocket science here. Nothing is that sexy out of this. You are just taking a command. Instead of you typing it into the CLI, you type it into a YAML or something like that.
Does it format it for you, like in JSON or something, so it's easy to consume it and break it apart or anything else?
You could, on top of this, do something that would then format it, yes.
Or something?
But this is now you gotta realize, this is a core module now, so it has to work in every terrible situation you can think of, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're trying to do, and if you're running Python, like, I think it has to be backwards compatible, like 2.7 or something, 2.4, something crazy. So, anything that's in core, while it is rock solid, it is not the complete answer. It is the start. You can say, oh, here's what I can do, the bare minimum. All right? Now, what you can do is you can think about, okay, I can create a lot of these files ahead of time. I can automate creation of these. I can put variables in here, and I'll get to Ginger variables and things like that. But essentially, all I wanted to do is say, I've got a blank device. I think it's blank. You see. So, here's my big router. This is the viral world. Nothing going on here. And then if I go to, there we go. And if I do my Ansible playbook, which I should show you the actual playbook. So just to break down what the command you do. This is YAML format also. So I'm going to get more specific with that. I realize that I may not have structured this most easily, but
It's still 3 weeks.
that's right. So anything with a tick mark, that's an item in a list. Okay? And when you see colon, that's key value pair. So think dictionary. Right? So here's a list of dictionaries with a list of dictionaries with a list inside of that. So this is the full playbook right here. It's saying I'm gonna talk to my local host because again, like I said, I can't go anywhere and get it done. I got to do it locally. In here, I'm going to have my host IP. Now, On a later one, you're gonna call me a liar and say you had to do localhost. Well, I can actually create a host file that generates IPs that I can use here. Then I could say, you know, and I can select host through a file. But for this one, we're just gonna keep it simple. Username, password, that's straightforward. Commands, this is gonna literally do these commands. And the iOS config, it's gonna go ahead and do, you know, conf t, all that stuff for you, and then it's just gonna type these commands out. Some of the hotness of this is that you can say, what is the parent command? That's pretty nice. I say, well, this is the primary command. These are going to be the subcommands within that. So I'm creating an ACL column test, and I'm going to create a bunch of ACL entries as such. And I can also do before here, which will clean it out just in case if there was one before, I don't want it anymore, I'm going to start clean and create a new ACL. And then here is the same concept. I'm configuring the Edge RP with a couple of networks and some other lines. Now, you'll tell me, I still need to know how a router is configured when I look at that, and you're absolutely right. All it is taking a string and putting into an established SSH session to that box. Okay? So it's not the cool stuff.
So what happens?
Yeah.
Right now, I've noticed Ansible configuration management tools are really good for deploying infrastructure.
Yes.
I'm now struggling with operating. For example, I run a lab, so there's constant changes, right?
Yeah.
One day a port's in VLAN 25, the next day it's in 26. Keeps on moving like that. Have you faced a similar problem with using this type
Absolutely.
of style?
That's the hardest part is situational awareness. You know, you need to know where you are today. Ansible is,
because right now I'm the gatekeeper. I have to always
It's like-
go in and
it's-
make
I
a
mean-
change, and I want to get my users to be able to make these changes themselves. Because I
It's-
don't need to be involved.
it's both like declarative and imperative at the same time. You know, sort of, if you catch what I'm saying. I'm imperative with the command structure. It's going to be these, but it's declarative from the perspective of I'm just saying do this function, but I don't know exactly what's configured there. Now, when we get to a real API, like the ASA REST API, you can do things because then everything is structured in a way that you can do a little more with. Now, as far as interfaces and things like that, I still need something to key off from. I would need to know, okay, somebody moved it from port 7 to port 12, unless there's some distinguishing factor. I don't know that. I can't expect Ansible to know that either. Now, if there's something that I can key off of, if there's a description change, if there's a MAC address or something that I can see, that I can then take action upon, then yeah, I can do that. And I can do that through these, but it would be pretty terrible because it'll give you JSON formatted strings, which you can then take the string out, then do a now I'm forgetting it. The line where you can convert a string to a dictionary. I can't remember the command.
What I'm curious about today, so I don't know if your network is like mine that changes a lot, but if somebody wants to make a change, like add a new VLAN to a particular trunk that you're servicing for the customer. Basically, can this kind of way of dealing with Ansible do that change without any kind of disruption to the network? Because typically I found that it somewhat disrupts it. And I have to actually go in there manually and just do it myself because I'm much better at doing it manually and adding that particular VLAN to the trunk manually.
Yeah, so if you're doing something like adding a VLAN to a trunk, so you can go, so I'm going to jump ahead real quick.
So
on
like
another
how do
thing.
you do little things like that? So you deploy it using Ansible, and then now you have to go and make itty-bitty changes as you move on. Do you go in and make those changes manually, or do you come back?
What I would say is that I would then think I need to treat my infrastructure as code. If I'm going to have only Ansible manage it, then I can do that. So like, for example, this represents a spline switch in my node. So these are the features that I need to turn on, these are the VRFs that live, and the VLANs, the SBIs, And so now here are the VLANs that exist on each of those trunks that you're talking about, right? So if I edit that and add a number to it, it can be, I can do that in a non-destructive way. Whereas this, because this is now the source of truth, right? Whereas essentially I know that I'm configured this way because I'm only going to configure it through this. You know what I'm saying? Otherwise, I'd need something that would grab the config, then create, then give me a perspective of what the situation is, so that I can make the change and that it's not service impacting. Ansible's not there yet. You can program something to do that just as easily, but that would be a significant effort because it really depends on way too many different variables within your situation. You said, well, you know enough to do it the right way. Well, then, you know, so if you're just going to do a switch port trunk VLAN add number, essentially in Cisco speak, then that is what this would be doing. So I call a Python, well, it's an Ansible module, which is going to say switch port trunk VLAN add blah, however many times. So it's going to do it 10, 30, 100, 101, 102, 103, all the way through like that. Because that's the way that module is designed, not because Ansible is smart. Ansible's just a framework that if you're not telling it to do the thing that you want it to do, you're not going to likely get that outcome.
And you said, because that's still private, right? This module is showing us now, these are private.
Oh no, these are perfect. These have been out for a year and a half. This is all Jason Edelman stuff that I'm robbing. Blind. I mean, he did some great work, and then we hired him. So now he's doing ACI stuff, I guess. I don't know.
Do you have HSRP? Do you have HSRP on your feature list?
Should I?
Curiosity. I was just curious.
Well, this is just, all this is doing is calling a module that will do, I don't have it there. I know why I don't have it there.
It's under eight. Yeah, it's under eight.
Is it?
The reason I was asking is
Oh.
his module has, you know, like they go and check things first and then they'll compare it before it commits.
Yeah.
He just like blindly takes it, so it's the HSRP and so then it'll fault when it gets down to this one, say like, oh, unrecognized feature. I was just curious if you guys did make.
Yeah, there's things that he didn't do all the way that you have to finish. Yeah. Like he didn't do OSPF. He didn't
Do
do.
you have an OSPF module?
Not working. Because unfortunately, initially I did, and I'll just kind of walk you through the steps. Where I started was
I'll trade
Was
you
this
the
way.
XCAN module for an OSPF module.
oh yeah. Well, I mean, if I could get some time to get that done, I'm definitely get it done. Where am I going here? I don't remember what I'm doing anymore. Oh yeah. So I wanted to show a Junction template. So
Sorry, I'm sure.
let's actually let's go back to this. So,
Modules, the new book you made.
I was gonna say,
do we not care about running this one? And I'll keep moving on to the good stuff. This one's boring. I can pull this one out. I can run it, but we can just say, wow, there's no config and now there's config. It's not like it's,
Yay!
so yeah, I could just do Ansible, like, let's go. Really hard to type it, isn't it? What did I call that one? iOS. Name, it's running the config. I guess I should have done quad B to like get some feedback. But, and if we want to go to our router, which I think is over here. No, so that's the thing. Is it here? So you can see, bam, there's my ACL, isn't it beautiful? And here's my AHRP. Now, if that's all we were going to talk about, it would not be worth here even to talk about it. So that's step one. Something else can configure that's not me. That's phase one. So then we go back to, now there's also a couple modules that'll be templates. And I'm not blowing you off, we'll get to the good stuff that you're asking about. Configure the grid. Here's template. This one can take, well, this is not very exciting what it shows here. But what it'll do, it'll take a Jinja template and hopefully a variable somewhere that actually fill it out, and then deploy that. So that gives you the option of having something a little more.
Those templates you can generate and borrow, right? You just export them out.
Oh,
So that you get your server.
I don't know.
You can export the config, is that what you're?
I can export a config, but I have to change stuff to make it a template.
So you're talking about the YAML template or the
Yeah, but yeah.
iOS
you can-
template? Oh, yeah. So.
Oh, no, that's the YAML. So here's my Jinja file. I was going to talk about Jinja. So anything with double quotes is a variable. So now I can write a config template. It's my gold config, and it can blow it out like this. Now, this is just the boring version of the templating. Notice it's all just simple variable replacement. There's no if that, there's no looping, there's no sub-variables, something dot something else. But so I could run this, which I don't know if it works or not, but we can try it. Because I just made this up early today, I haven't had a chance to actually see if it works. But let's see, 'cause I don't use this module, I actually use something else. I found one problem that's the way I go to. Anyway, so we'll skip that one to get to more exciting stuff. Show. Before we do that, I wanted to go to the ASR 1K, this is 1K. I believe this is it. Okay, blank config. Nothing going on here. And this may or may not completely work because there's a lot in that template that I need to make sure that the interfaces with the right numbering scheme and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to take that Jinja template and use some variables that I had sitting there. Let's go take a look at that. It'll take a minute. So all these things are going to be filled in with some variables. So here is, let me show you the. Okay, yeah, so this guy's going to look for some variables, all right? So I have my template. It's going to look for the ASR bars, YAML, and pull in those variables. And here's some of them. This is actually, I quickly took hopefully everything out that is real. Because this is me doing a Metapod build earlier this week. And so essentially, here's a bunch of the variables that are going to be used to create that ASR config. Here's my subnet, there's my, wherever you see these variable names, they're going to be replaced with the entity. So here's some IPs. This is doing some filtering. You want to know what is going on here. This is taking this variable, which is up here, looking for the fourth address, and throwing that, and filtering that guy, and giving him an address form for that ASR bit variable, and similarly some of the other ones. Let's see how badly that config went. We got the red. Not always a good sign. But, there he is.
When it comes to the development of the scripts for Cisco, the staging environment, what do you use? Because like in Linux, I just use Vagrant. What do you do for Cisco? Do I need to go by viral and do my
You could
testing
viral or Vagrant. There's nothing wrong with Vagrant. You know,
without paying? I don't have a Cisco. I don't have access
yeah, but
to
you
Cisco
could spin up a CSR, which is iOS XE.
And those are free to download.
I don't know. I'm not sure what, it's just, it's code, so can you?
Camera.
I honestly don't know the answer. I haven't been in sales in
So how do you
13
test?
years.
How do you test? Do you point and read equipment when you're building these?
No, I do it all in either viral or
Viral, okay.
I do some stuff in Vagrant. I do like, 'cause I had a hard time getting the Nexus 9 pages when I'm writing viral.
Well, they're
But,
not officially out for.
I know, yeah.
It-
But they'll run beautifully in Vagrant, so that's.
Viral now runs in the cloud, right? So I don't have to put it on the web.
Yeah, Packet.net, yeah, so Packet.net is a cloud provider, but they have bare metal servers, which is kind of split between each viral, but yeah, you can get a 60 node network build out there.
So, yeah, you can see a good chunk of that got through. Sometimes a lot of config made it. I'd have to actually go through and see, because a lot of it's going to be my interface names are wrong or whatever, but because of the, I was able to take a template, populate it with my variables, and go to town with my config. And this is all core modules that are, have gone through the gauntlet of testing and
Like, where we failed, was that the point in there?
yeah, that's the stinky part about this, it is not atomic. You get what goes, and then it doesn't at that point. You don't know what didn't or didn't work.
I saw that there was like another piece that it would push back a couple of our config for you. Like, is that
Yeah, like
something
you
that would-
I can compare my config with the gold template.
Gotcha.
So, and it'll say, what's good, what's bad.
Like I said, if you're not done yet, the core module's gotta go.
Yeah, you gotta go a little further. So like, and to be fair, today is the first time that I've used this particular module. And I've never used it when you was talking about the config comparing. That actually is probably a good idea.
I just saw that, I haven't done it in iOS, just saw it in my case, so like in XOS.
Yeah, everything's so much nicer where you have an API. Yeah. But anyways, I wanted to start with what is readily available. Okay, so let's jump back into over here. So let the cat out of the bag. Some of it with Jinja templating. You're using variables. You can use expressions. So obviously this one's pretty clear. Variable site code is going to be site whatever dash firewall. But you can also have dictionary structure. So I have a variable VLAN 101 that has a subcomponent that is IP, and I'm asking for the first IP or the first entry in that dictionary, or less depending on actually the rest of the or second entry. That's why you look at it when I say first one, I say one, but yeah, the first would be 0. So clearly this would be the second one. Also, it can loop and iterate. So I could have I realize now this would make a lot more sense if you could look at the variable file at the same time. But so essentially, I can have a variable config routes, and within that there's a bunch of routes, and it'll loop through them and fill in this data. So I don't have to type this 10 times, or I can just keep changing the number of entries in that particular list. And there's also conditional statements. So I say, well, okay, only certain devices have VLAN 41, or I could say if you are, router 1 versus router 2, and you have them in HSRP pairs, so one guy will be dot 2, the other will be dot 3. You can do that in if-then statements, just so you can clean that up. Or you can also do that within Ansible variables as well, but this is one way to look at that. Probably find that. That would make it clear.
Well, we're in minor pain now, so.
It's always easy to be the one who's there and have hecklers.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, without hecklers, I wouldn't know anybody's paying attention. So, I don't know where that one is.
I welcome hecklers in the room. I enjoy it. I try to get people to heckle me at dinner, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't want to participate.
The notifications, just walk away, about that.
Well, we didn't, I mean, everybody was visually engaged in listening and stuff. It was just, I was trying to get people to like, answer this question.
Okay, yeah, so here, like, so for example, if my routing structure was structured like this, I'm available, and then I named the route 1, route 2, not realizing that I could just make it a list. This is done like my first week of learning how to do this. And you can just have, within that, the network and the mask, and I happen to know that for this one that they all have the same next hop. So I can just iterate through them like that, and keep them in a format like this, and not need to have a line for each of them in my Ginger template. We just iterate through them and populate.
Are you saying like a list, like a dictionary? So you would just index network maps?
Yeah, well, I would have made this instead of a key value. I would have just made that a list, and then just run through, and iterate through, and say network mask. I would also, probably have next hop, and I actually might have that in some of my new stuff. Now I think about it. Yeah, so we'll get that when we get there. So YAML, I've said it enough times. It's just a very basic way. Anybody can read that and know, okay, this is for the old people. We know what it's called a record in C, but it's a dictionary structure, a way to just hold a lot of information at once. You have your different fields. They could be lists, they could be strings, they could be a dictionary, a subdictionary. Like in this case, the languages is a subdictionary with a key value pair. It's very, very flexible. The only problem is, how far can you go out to the left of your notepad or whatever you're using for.
I like how you throw your creds in there, just like right in the.
That's right. I got
In the middle of
represent,
the
you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I put all that time into it. It's got to be worth something.
This guy's a dual CCIE. We should have been listening to the first half.
Yeah. Well, depending on the audience, like, because I didn't put it in the front. Depending on the audience, CCIE is actually a negative.
Yeah.
Because they're like, this is just a router jockey. I'm not gonna listen to this guy. He doesn't know anything about programming. Yeah. So, which is partially true. But, and so here I'm looking at the infrastructure as code. It's again YAML, but this here is specifically the thing I was talking about, the ASA. So you have 3 major dictionaries. You have your access list, your network object groups, and your service object groups. And it assumes that you're just using object groups. I didn't go to the extent of other ways to format it. And here I can put IPs, I can put in object groups, or I can put in any, so it's flexible. But, or you just omit an item and it'll figure it out as any. But the idea here is that I can create an entry that is a list of my ACL entries with the name, with the items that are interesting inside this graph view. And then, it might be a commit, it might be false. Protocol TCP or UDP position is where I want it in my ACL. Do I want it the first line? Do I want it the last line? Ordinarily, when you're doing permits, you can always just put it in the first line. You just keep adding them at the front. But when you're doing a deny, that will be wrong. So you gotta be aware of your positional arguments. But this is something that you can put in front of somebody that doesn't know how to configure an ASA, it says, I can get behind that. I know that I've got a variable for my Kafka servers. I've got, I put in my ports that it's talking to, and, it's not the most easy to read, but it makes sense to a non, router or firewall guy. And so we'll do that infrastructure as part of it. So we'll go ahead and take a look at, so here's another one, KMS. So what I did was, we look at we'll go to the one that I put on here. So this chunk right here is exactly what I put up. So we have an example playbook of deploying service object groups. I'm gonna create members. This is if I want to do them individually. I can put it in here for my. It's going to be a named server object group. It's present, meaning it's going to be there. TCP, and the value is SMTP. You can put in numbers. You can put in strings as long as it means something. Otherwise, you get an error back. Same way you can do a list of members instead of just one single value. And
I'm sorry, when you say you can put in there, you're saying the Ansible module that you wrote for processing this stuff expects certain stuff here.
Yeah, so this is, I'm looking at, this is the how you would directly interface with the module. So these are the items that it's expecting. But the way that I structured it is that it could consume a YAML like this instead of you having to do this and individually put items. So I don't want to have to write, okay, I'm adding SMTP, okay, one more line, I'm adding whatever else, or I'm deleting, and so for example, this one is removing that particular entry that added the SMTP entry. And the other way you can do it is, as I was saying there, the infrastructure as code example is that I'm going to import a YAML, which in this case is the YAML file describing the ASA. And so I just have some stuff there. I made a network object group with API nodes. It's just the value that I have there in the CIDR format. And the same thing, I can say, I can do /32, I can do without /32 and put it out. And then I can create my service object group. I can then generate my ACL. I also threw in how it can do routes as well. And then also just generic CLI commands that are outside of these 4 core items. So now this one would then be able to be consumed by this playbook here. So you don't have to interact with this really ever. You just would say Ansible playbook, blah, and you either create this as a variable that you would enter at runtime or something like that, or you would change this file. So the way I do it for my guys is I make this as generic as possible. For what we use in production is this one here. Same kind of thing, but I created a variable called service. So when you run it, you would say Ansible playbook, ASA API, extra vars service is blah. And so I wrote it, the service templates in here that all say ASA service blah ACL. Yeah. So it's a data structure that we use. So as different Scrum teams decided they want to deploy LBAS, for example, well, here's what the ACLs look like, with a whole bunch of lines. Here's what the object groups look like that are consumed with that. And this, I also have at the bottom here, what are the commands, what will they look like? So this is what I'm expecting. So this ASA code turns into this in YAML. In addition to that, I wrote a script that will consume a file and turn it into a YAML. So, or consume a config rather. So you could have a config that's an ASA config, and you're like, I really don't want to do that. That looks terrible. And then say, okay, fine, you'll turn it into a. So what I did here, so like for example, this represents our entire config on an ASA. And granted, yes, it goes on for days, but I'm not reading it very often, so it's not something that I'm concerned with. But if I was looking at it as, this is infrastructure as code, I'd be like, this is my config, this is what I edit. And everything's idempotent, so if it's already there, it doesn't do anything. If in a perfect world, that would be great, but in reality, we end up doing things one item at a time via the service network. So, like, okay, a database is a service guys, they want to deploy Trove. So we have the Trove variables for their servers, and the network object group, and the ACLs represented here. And you know, unfortunately, it's incredibly short when you look at what it is in the ASA command, but at least it's something that can be that is human readable. Versus this is not something that I would expect. You know, my database guy to be able to write for me, whereas they were able to write this. So we could run through something. I think my ASA is alive. Let's see. Yeah, he's there. So, so this is the ASA API interface, which is pretty awesome. It's got all kinds of documentation for every different call you have. It is such an underrated item that Cisco made. Nobody seems to even know or care. But from my perspective, it's far and away the best API that we've created for a traditional network device. I love it, but I also am very, very sad because they don't extend it to when you're in multi-context mode, which unfortunately my team decided they're switching everything to multi-context mode. So I had to create a script that will then take arguably YAMLs and convert them into CLI commands to be ran on the different contexts. So, yeah, they really uglied up my
Just like backwards, huh?
yeah, well, it's painful. So, but at least it's still something that I can extend to the team that they can develop, and then I have to trust my programming that level. You know, like, okay, am I converting it into the CLI correctly to be ran? Seems awful. What to do that.
What about that? This on which ASA or like, is there a kind of version the API came out with?
9.3 is gonna come out.
Clustering support on that?
I'm sorry.
Is clustering supported?
I'm
just curious.
Good question. I don't know if the command.
I
is-
saw failover, but I didn't see the clustering.
That's a great point. I don't know. I haven't had to do that. Yeah, I don't see it. Now, there's a lot of things that are hidden in weird spaces, but I would think that would be a neat thing. Let's see if there's anything further. Nope. So that is also, actually, yeah, so I mean, hypothetically, what you could do is you could get away with writing some CLI
Exactly. just a
scripting to
mix.
do that part, which is kind of stinks. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. Unless it's somewhere else that I don't know of. This is the time. I'm not, if I find it,
Yeah,
I'll
no,
get
no,
back to
just
you.
random questions. I don't want to hold it.
Yeah, that's a good one though. So, let's see. Where are we? So, go to. This one, yeah, I do by I use the host file for this one, so I'll show you the difference there. So let me just do that one. So yeah, I'm taking advantage of using the host file. So it's going to go through the ASA, so if it's the host file or inventory file, whatever you use with your -I, or if you have it, set as an Ansible variable in the, Ansible config, you can then iterate over, or you can replace that variable with based on that host. So I have this host is, yeah, it's right here. So it's on an I format. If you guys are familiar, it'll explain that. Huh? Yeah, it's like, early, yeah.
So about the,
Oh, did you? So everything's new.
about the way you've broken up the ASC config into services, so
Yeah.
what you're saying is actually overlay that, so you give the router and config, hey, here's a format that you need to write to the variables. You get the switch spec for
Mhm.
what they need, and then you just take those and mush them together and consume that and
Well-
put that in the ASC together.
What I usually do is, because things are rolled out individually, so it's that's where, to your point of when you were asking about, how do you deal with incremental change? Incremental change is the hardest part. New deployment is too easy. You start with a config, you do, like, I would do a full config and just have it in text format and with Ginger variables and just have that and then copy that file over there. That's too easy. The hard thing is the incremental changes, like so we're talking about here. So using the REST API to then just make those simple changes to add those. So next Thursday, we're doing a database as a service deployment in Amsterdam. Okay, I have to run that script during the maintenance window, or whoever has to run that to deploy the firewall configuration for that. There also might be some switch configs where I'm adding VLANs and trons and things like that, which I'll be using JSON Hub and stuff for. The same thing as we were looking at infrastructure as code for that, where I showed you before, I did remember that one, the big long NXLS config. And so we can make changes that way too. The problem is that there's no central database that's like, this is what the config should look like. It's not like the TLF stuff, or if you're familiar with ESC, our other product, that they're the owner of the config and they know what's there, and if anybody makes any of the changes outside of it, it goes crazy. Whereas this is much more of a, you hope not much has changed, and that anything that the commands will go through as you have. If they have already been done, they're not going to be implemented. So if I ran this twice, then it wouldn't do any changes.
But if I log into the ASC right now and added in my own rule, and you ran this playbook again, would that take that and that rule, strictly enforcing the config, or it doesn't restrict?
No, yeah, it wouldn't delete necessarily unless I put in that intelligence, So it's unfortunately it's not. It's that's what I'm saying. It's like declarative in that fashion where I'm going to make my config changes that I have in front of me, but I'm not going to enforce a config unless I have a way to deploy that. So there's ways to do that, like for example in iOS XR, where you can take advantage of config replace, where I just I think it's also in Juniper where here's my old config, here's my new config. This guy was active, this guy is not anymore. And if I screwed up and I, like for example, forgot to put usernames in there, I can't log in anymore. You know, so there's things like that where you can completely replace the config, and you have to have a complete config that you agree is correct. And I would, you know, I could run through. Let's see if I can do this right here.
But that can potentially be disruptive.
Well, it could. That's why you gotta add your own stuff. What am I looking for?
What's the platform that is your access layer that you're talking about? What platform is your access layer? Like you're talking about changing access ports for your consumers, right?
Right now, our backbone consists of humans. But, you know, I played a little bit with the Juniper like stuff a little bit. And, you know, I'm just concerned that primarily because I have to deal with templating, that, you know, if I go in and change the template, you know, how disruptive is that? And there's no easy way I found, at least with Juniper, to sort of check things and see if, you know, other than manually checking, okay, if my DTP is still working.
Oh, right, sorry.
Did I get a flap or anything else? Like manually.
Too many different.
I don't know yet of an automated way to figure that out with Juniper. And when I do, I'll be very excited.
Well, the JLM scripts he's talking about, they go in first. It's all NextOS. So it's going to it'll pull whatever the configuration is, store that in the dictionary, and then whatever your config command is, you know, say, is that present or not? And then, you know, determine about that if they would commit or not. And then on the output side, it says that numbers change, numbers okay, right? It's like nice and colored. Become as quick as like all green if nothing has changed, and yellow will be changing. You know, failure.
And this is only with Cisco, right? No, it's still.
I mean, I don't look at those models as closely, but I'm sure there's some, you know, like you look at GitHub and Ansible, and it's probably a good starting point in that route.
I've never used Ansible before.
I just, usually it's this whole thing, so they send checks. First to the other side.
But that module is public. Yeah, so somebody could grab that, see how they do it, and then just, they'd have to pair up with maybe Python guys.
It needs a little on the side. I mean, it depends on how far you want to take it. You know, there's some simple deployment ones, you know, very good, but then as you get a whole data center deployment, it's a lot more than what they have present. I mean, that's on a GeoScale account. You know, or BGP. So I wouldn't do that.
I'm looking at all your stuff.
This is something I'm not going to have to like this file changes, but I've recently started putting like a container dedicated per like topology. I mean, that way it's like a clean environment. All of this files that are and matches your own point.
Yeah. I did a bunch of changes to try to update it, to upstream it, and then, so now I've totally diverged from my working version. So,
Well, that's exactly what happened right now. Like, this is, I can't have this sprawl.
hopefully it's not good. Maybe not. kind of take my word for that. I don't want to eat up too much what I screwed up.
Enamel mode that will flag out errors for you.
Or something like, kind of mentorship, you got, they have like a demo net,
Yeah, yeah.
net or something.
That's handy to do.
I like just, this is down there.
Oh, this is Sublime. So I switch around between Sublime and I use Anaconda for my environment, so it's between that and Spider. Really well. But yeah, it's not good. Yeah. All right, so the other thing is that we can look at it's not all set in stone, what you have. So we can go to, when you go to GitHub, you can look at what the stuff looks like. You've seen what the modules look like. But now let's go down the rabbit hole one step further and say, well, I liked, what I was doing in the iOS command. Let's take a look at the Python. What are they doing underneath? What other intelligence can I bake in? Or, maybe there's something else that I wanted to do. So what I ended up doing, this one, there's not that much going on to look at. But what I ended up looking at was so there's my version of that hopefully still works. And so I wrote these modules that'll deploy the different functions. So the network object groups, the routes, the service object groups, the ACL, and it's not the prettiest Python, but you see there's a lot of documentation at the top. It's actually might look better with colors. You can see, you talk about each of the different functions in their portion. So this is just running a command line. So I'm going to print my ASA class object, and in my vendor data, I'm going to set up a couple variables for that. This is using the REST API. So it's a lot cleaner than the CLI stuff. I can go ahead and set up my credentials, and then all I'm going to do is running using requests against that for my build. You can see it's just simple Python requests. I'm going to post certain items, and I'm going to receive my my request itself from some other function. So it's going to be called by. Here. So I generate my desired data from what I've received. I have my list of commands, and that I received as a CLI variable from the module. I'm going to go ahead and do the dev.cli with the desired data, which is just this guy, pretty straightforward. He's going to effectively just do one cycle. So this is a really boring, easy one. So he's going to just send that request with that data, and get the response he gets. So that one's not as exciting because it's just sending the CLI. Whereas the other ones where I'm creating an ACL, I need to validate, okay, what are my TCP services and their names? Do they give me a number? Do they give me the name of the TCP service? Do they give me a number or the name of the UDP service? And then what on the name? Parse my arguments. Initially, I'm going to try to chop it up to see is it TCP, is it UDP, and that essentially changes the structure of my call. So if I go down a little bit, I'm just going to ignore a little bit of this stuff. And so here is the format of my API call. Like this. So I'm going to have Permit is, you know, a Boolean, position is the number. It's gonna be a kind of address. Is it an object group? Is it an IP, v4 address, IPv6? Service, is it a TCP, is it UDP? Same thing for these guys on the destination side. And I can parse that up in JSON and throw it into my request, post it to the ASA, and voila. And there we go. So we can see that from here. So if I want to go to, let's say, I want to do a routing change. If I want to do a post for a routing change, and I can say, well, I want to know what are my options. I mean, you can see there's several different characters you can set, and you could say, I wanted to see an example. Well, bam, here is your payload. All I need to do is get that payload somehow, perform a request with whatever I need in there. So you can see the vast majority of my Python is just trying to parse the information that was given to me, make some sense of it, make some decisions, do some checking of the input from the user. All I'm trying to do is come up with that effectively. And then in the route situation at least. And then I can post that data, and I'm going to receive something back in nice pretty JSON to, if I were to do a get instead. So like right now I can just do, I don't know if I have any routes on there. I'm going to do a get of, and so, going to then I can do is I can export the data into a Python script that will do the same thing, and then give you an example of how would I do it. I would, set my server to that, set my R's. Oh, that's right. I think there's no routes there, so I guess that's the root. Everything's good. That's in and it essentially does the work for you of what it would look like for this specific call in Python. Now you're going to want to manipulate your data somehow and make it interesting from what your request is going to look like, so that it can fit into that format. But it really does a lot of the work for you. It really explains, what is my expected payload, what would a sample Python script look like. That's why I like this one so much better than some of the other ones. So you can see the old NX interface. This is the sandbox, so I can kind of get a gist of if I were to do, just were to post that command. And I shouldn't really expect any response. It's just going to say no, because all I did was change my context. I can do, and the other thing is that I can look at, what's my Python looking like to actually do this. So it gives you an idea. Now, you'll look at that and say, well, all it did was wrap up your command inside of JSON. Well, that's exactly what it did. So the original NX API was really a minimalist API. It was written after the fact to try to present that. Now they're trying to convert it to a REST API, and they've got a lot of calls that are available, but you need a later version of code, and there's only a certain subset that's available to it, and it's not native. Whereas in ACI, it's native REST calls. That's how the infrastructure makes its calls internally via REST. So it's just exposing that versus being translated. So you know that there's no opportunity for miscommunication.
So do you, the question I asked you who get into infrastructure as code, do you use it to help train junior people on the best practices? So by saying, look, I've coded my knowledge of how you're supposed to make programming in this language, so instead of bothering me, just do this. do you do that? I'm just curious.
That would be a good idea.
Could be starting on Monday.
I don't have any numbers like that on my team. It'd be
No,
great.
Everyone's pretty senior than I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody on my team has already got their number, so everybody's the same. So we all kind of have the gist. We would love to have junior members to help share the load, but that is not the case. So yeah, back to I guess the
Because like for example, I learned OpenStack by going through the OpenStack Ansible playbooks because they had best practices in coding. I mean, how you encode your RabbitMQ properly, how you configure AG proxy properly, baked in with all their knowledge of how to do it right. And I was just curious.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you could effectively build a gold template without it being really in a configuration template. Like that's kind of I guess what we have with the infrastructure as code. For example, that I had for still around here somewhere. That I had for the data center build. You know, it's just a generic. This is the things that you should have on that box. This is a very simplified version. I didn't want to show one where I'm just creating VLANs, turning on features. You can build, I guess this way could be a way you could sort of create an Ansible module to configure, or you can create modules that will only allow you to do what you consider to be best practice, I guess is what I'm getting at. That I could only, in my task, I can only consume certain things. So these are the plays. I'm configuring certain VLAN range. I'm configuring port channels. I'm configuring layer 2 links. I'm creating my SVIs. I'm only going to have plays for the things that you should be doing. And if it's not on there, it shouldn't be done, or if it needs to be added later for some new feature or for some new functionality or security vulnerability, who knows. I could see it going that way. That makes sense. But
Have you done any upgrades using infrastructure as code?
not using infrastructure as code, but using I guess, yeah, it was all custom Python, and I don't think I was ready to trust it for any in-service upgrades. It was just upgrades, before deploying. So, or if you take a device out of service, so you got two routers and you force the traffic through the one, and then go ahead and run the reboot script or reload script. We didn't get to the level of being confident enough to say, here's my script, it's going to change OSPF metrics or BGP metrics to force traffic this way, and then upgrade this guy, and then wait for him to come back up, and then force it back, and then upgrade the other one. We didn't get to the level of confidence, or I guess we didn't have the amount of testing we needed to do to actually prove that it was working. And things like that, it's not terribly time consuming to just say, okay, I'm going to run the play to move the traffic live, validate that it's good, get eyes on it, not just believe my show commands that are getting consumed by my playbook, and then pick another play to do the upgrade, because we have some.
You automate the validation. So all the show
Not
commands
enough.
that you use to check
Not
BGP
enough.
still works on the okay.
Yeah, that's probably my biggest back burner item. It's always you're always putting out fires, you're always adding stuff. So I rarely get even to do this. So I spend most of my time helping drive new services, not necessarily doing what I was hired for. So my job is to help architect and design how we're going to deploy VPN as a service, how we're going to deploy MPLS connectivity into your ISP for your cloud directly into your tenant, how to deploy load balancer as a service into OpenStack. Unfortunately, I love that part too, but I don't think there's anything new that I've configured or developed this year that you guys are looking at. That's how far behind I am. I think I kind of finished in November, and they're like, oh, we're done with that, it's working. and then I just got, more stuff in my lap. So,
Right.
I
What kind of software? Does it kind of work? Shit.
yeah, it's really hard for me to do, because, I mean, this is your infrastructure, you need it to work.
Yeah.
So I haven't quite made the migration to that mindset yet. But,
You're a rare network engineer.
yeah. So now we've got the viral stuff open. Is there anything you guys wanted to create your own little plays or generate anything now to just blow on it live and do something interesting? Or do we just kind of continue and question and answer and that kind of stuff?
I have one more question for you.
Sure.
The reloads for the upgrade scripts you guys were working with,
Yeah.
was that through Ansible Python, or like how'd you handle it, the socket timeout? Do you remember any of that?
Yeah, we would have. Let's see if I can find that. So I have some of that in. There's next section. So no. So I think this just kicked it off. So we had a better one that actually waited. It had some kind of, shoot, that feels odd to me. I don't remember exactly how we did that, how we solved that problem.
Well, this is the same way I started out, as well as the copy, but then I was starting to recopying, so then I made one that removed it, but instead of waste, and I like similar image every time. But one of the things I did was if I didn't know how to do PLPs and all that, I would just set a each variable to config and reload it. So certainly not for it, but reload that.
Yeah, maybe I have. Here in the notebook there. Yeah, I don't know if I want to put that. So yeah, we had. It came our way. It was really just rigged, where I think it would just keep trying to hit that box for however long, and it was just kind of. Yeah, I think we just use expect actually. Now I'm thinking about it. So just keep hitting the box to wait for it to come back from the reload, to then engage with the next, step. So a really low tech solution to that problem, but it ended up being effective.
Well, you would, okay, so you would call.
I think we used a while and then had a module that did that. Now,
There's an Ansible module that we're doing wait and then kill, and you can like send it service ports too, like any of the core ones as well. That's one of the ways I did it with.
yeah, that's actually
chicken
a
box as well.
good idea. I mean, because again, I'm leading this venture, and you can see where my knowledge gaps are. So whenever we get to work, we just move on to the next thing. So there's always better ways to do stuff. So that's another good reason to have
That's
this
why I'm here
discussion.
asking you all these questions, and I know issues and stuff, and take it back.
Yeah. Oh, man, where did I put that? It's gonna bother me. I don't remember.
I'll be looking for you for the.
Yeah,
envoy.
it was sometime last week. So yeah, and here's a bunch of references that I have to. Oh, I didn't even do the Napalm. So I borrowed a lot of concepts. So I borrowed PySysco, which was Jason Edelman's NX API interactive. I guess Ansible modules is the best way to say it. That will do the code. We can look at some of that real quick. I don't even think of it. Here we go.
So would you say that, or do you use Ansible effectively at this point for like network deployments that you probably are gonna end up writing some Python code to customize modules? Like there's not enough there that you can just kind of build and stack what's
Yeah.
based on the existing.
Well, you
module.
don't necessarily. Well, I guess it depends. You either need to know Python so that you can manipulate what is already there, or you need to know something else well enough so that you can create it from scratch. So, like what is it? And here, so you can see all these different things that Jason created little scripts for to deploy. So if you want to do NTP or any UJOITs and stuff. Configure interfaces. You know, it goes on for days or whatever stuff. There's obviously there's stuff missing, but he made it into nice little chunks, which, so then that way you can then use those building blocks to do something more effective, like the infrastructure code, the YAML example that I was talking about before, where I can then do these individual pieces and make something big out of it. You could think of doing something similar with the rudimentary iOS config stuff, where you could just make small, just replace variables with dictionary, or so make a dictionary of certain config items, and then reference that dictionary for a different, and I guess maybe another YAML that would then reach into those configuration items and use Jinja to replace that with your particular situation via variable replacement. It'd get a little hairy, but at least it would be sort of infrastructure as code, but using the current module. So you could do something like that without needing to know Python as well. But yeah, if you wanted to do exactly what you want, you really want Python.
You're saying like the conf command, is it, right? Like
Yeah, exactly. So I could run the conf with the YAML. So I would have it do with items, and then have that that variable that would go through it, and it would then it would probably have an initial YAML that would reference another one that would, or it would reference, yeah, it would probably reference another one that would have individual pieces. It would be maybe, so, or another thing you could cheat is create a module that creates a module. Or not, because I have a play that creates another play.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was ugly, that I had to do when I was doing that thing I was talking about, converting my my ASA, that infrastructure as code. So I wanted to keep using this, but I need to normalize it in order to use CLI. So it was in here somewhere. So I created a Okay, so what I had was a Jinja, a YAML that was going to be created. So this is to represent what I'm going to create. So this guy, when I run it, will then replace my task main YAML with that. So it'll fill it in with this based on what's in my variables from the infrastructure as code. And then in this format, then it can be consumed by the commands. So this is just, so it's a little bit convoluted, but it's still sort of infrastructure as code and still using what you already have without needing to learn Python and starting all the way over. But it's kind of a mess.
So are the product people in the SA team, are they aware of your pain?
Oh, they are, yeah.
Okay.
And it was a decision that was, it's the right decision. It was either that or create a zillion ASAVs. So we're changing our cloud format from having one cloud to multiple individual pods, we call them. And in that way, each of them will have their own ASA context in order to reach the APIs for that particular cloud.
I'm talking about the usability feature, like, well, why don't they have?
Oh, you mean the people that create ASA? Oh,
Yes.
hell yeah. They know.
Okay.
They know my name.
That doesn't sound like something I'd want to ever.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's really, I mean, granted, I appreciate what they did, and they did a great job. I also understand the level of effort for them to extend that into multi-context mode is going to be significant, but I think it creates a lot of value. Because you can do things that are not ugly like this. And, something like this, which is, human readable, and not have to have a Jinja, have a YAML Jinja. Yeah, because you can see this is not readable at all. You don't know what the hell's going on in here. This is just me converting that to end up with this.
How did you push that out? Like, what did you call to push that YAML or that Denver template
This,
or whatever?
well, yeah, so there's a,
'Cause
yeah,
it's
here.
still in one.
So this converts a Jinja and just puts it somewhere. Okay? That's like it's the template, it's a core Ansible module. So it takes as input a Jinja file and then throws out whatever you need in the output. And so,
They're probably coming out in that direction, like usually you get your core register and you push.
I know.
That's it.
It was not, I don't like it.
No,
So
that's-
there's
that's a
any
good
way to get
idea.
around it. And it's very finicky too, so like, Ansible likes to try to parallelize. So even if you tell it not to, sometimes it will anyway. And so if I have an old main YAML from a prior, it may use that one. Or it may think that it's empty and skip that role. So,
I found the changes they made into that whole
oh, here it is. It's a,
work in progress. And 1.9 seems to be a lot more stable. I mean,
yeah, from a
you
specific
know,
perspective, 1.9, but there's so much more features in
Yeah.
2.1 and 2.
I'm still finding bugs every day, like a basic core module is misbehaving in my budget.
Yeah, well, they changed a lot of the way things are handled internally, so we're gonna run into the bug. But this looks
version,
pretty.
right?
You know, the answer is
Yeah,
really
I
good.
got
So you look at
one
this,
that
you're like,
uses
oh,
it.
this is the easiest play in the world. You know, nothing's going on interesting at all. And then you're like, okay, well, what's going on in these roles? So the deploy is very easy. So if I go to what's this guy? So that guy is just gonna run these against the ASA config, which is a not a core module yet. It's getting there. So it represents, it's very similar to the other ones, where you take in config lines and you deploy them. The only real difference is that you can use contexts. That's really the only obvious difference between the two. You can get it through it'll be out supposedly in 2.2. But you can look at the developer, the extra modules that are being developed, and you can grab it there. Again, everything looks very clean and minimalist in here, and they're using the not yet core module ASA that I have to find and put into my core directory to run it. But yeah, so even something backwards is just simple CLI commands can be converted into something that's consumable. Just how much work are you going to put into it? How much level of effort, and how much do you trust the process?
How much time do you feel is saved you as far as dealing with this with ASA?
I mean, I guess probably tens if not hundreds of hours. Just because.
And how much fewer typos are people making now?
Oh, that's the other bonus. Is we have not yet. We've got to the point where we're allowed to run this whenever we want. We don't need a change window. We don't need anything. It's been that successful. So yeah, initially before we had to either write up our methods of procedures, send that over to CM, and they'd be like, oh, I don't know what this is. And like, I know you don't know what that is. You're CM. But and then you have to walk through it, and it's okay, and you get to deploy it during whatever change window, and we fought back and said this has never failed. It's always been correct. And so we now got the okay to do it whenever we want, and so hopefully the new refactored version will be just as effective even with the extra layer of convolution.
So what does the review process look like for the section that you use Gary? So you make a change,
Mhm.
and you propose a change. Who looks at it in your change? Is it all techies or do some of the non-techie people?
It's all techie, yeah, so we
Okay.
control that. So what is nice about this is that anybody can propose a new service animal, which is what I want. I don't want to be in the business of typing, I want to be in the business of clicking +2 and doing, and, you know, moving on with my life. So that way, I've extended it, so now people write it, and I just validate, yeah, okay, you know, I might, get a +1 from, you know, our security guys, meaning not the firewall guys, but the, you know, to validate, that the flows actually are permitted. And then I'll look at it, make sure it makes sense, run it through once, you know, go viral, and make sure that nothing blew up. And, then we schedule it for deployment, you know, whenever is needed by the Scrum team.
So does it move to like the staging branch, then you test it, then it goes to that, and then it goes to a master branch? Or you just basically take that patch, apply it to viral, test it, and then say cluster and push?
Yeah, usually we'll run the patch. We'll run that, you know, I guess the branch or whatever the terminology is properly. Run that, make sure it works, and then it'll get merged. So we try to minimize bad stuff, making it into being merged.
Have you ever had to roll back anything?
Not yet, no, which is great.
That's cool, makes it easy life.
Yeah, I mean, and the other problem with that is that rollback isn't that simple because it depends on what did I deploy that time, you know? Like, if I roll back, what if I take away everything that I just added, I might break something. You know, I only want to take back the parts that were deployed. I'm sure there's something with an Ansible that they can keep track of only when you did that play. I just don't know.
Well, that's a gift there.
Sorry?
I said that's a gift there, right? That would take care of it. Like
But he
do-
doesn't-
Oh, no, I mean about at runtime. I'm saying, so if I ran, you know, 7 ACLs that I wanted to deploy, 3 of them were already there, and 4 of them got added. And if I needed to roll back, well, do I take those other 3 off? I don't know. That's the question there. So rollback is kind of a dangerous play there. I say roll forward again with what you think is really correct. So if I say I want to delete these 3, I'm going to delete those 3 and make another play that just does that.
That does it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So I think that's more of with the CI/CD form of thinking. You know, it's always continuous integration. You never go backwards. You only go forward. Now, you may go forward right there where you were before in your config, but it's still a later revision. Now, if I were to be using the TLS stuff, NSO, the Network Service Orchestrator, or people know it as NCS, I don't remember what that stood for before, that actually has a full-on rollback option where you give it the configuration changes you want. It will validate that against what it has in its configuration database because it's the owner of the configs, regardless of what changes you made. And it'll say these are the things these are the additions I need to make. I can deploy them across 50 different devices. If I'm making it completely atomic, and any one of them fails, it will completely roll back only the changes it made. If you need to be in that environment where things are tightly controlled, that's probably the right answer, not Ansible. So if you need to have that central authority, then I don't think Ansible is it. Ansible could be it, but it would involve a lot of additional overhead, you know, because I have no database of what the config really looks like. I have that YAML. If we're treating infrastructure as code and the YAML is the only place you configure by, then yeah, great, I'm good. But if that's not the case, if people are making changes elsewhere, then I'm not going to have the same level of confidence. And to go back to the NSO thing, it will sync the config with the boxes out there. So it's used by a lot of service providers use it as their network configuration manager / SDN controller. And it will manage the network as a single database. So it's essentially treating your network as a database versus treating it as individual items. And it's going to keep track of all the configurations that are each of those devices just as rows in a database. And if there's any changes to be made, it'll diff what, the new deployment, the code you want to change, and the configurations you want to add. And it'll look at that not only from a change perspective, but also a multi-vendor perspective too, where it knows these are the commands you're trying to write, and it can speak, so I go CLI, and it'll say, yeah, that's great, but this is what that means in Juniper CLI, this is what it means in ASA, this is what it means in iOS, this is what it means in XR. I'm going to only add those commands, and only do the diff. And if I need to roll back, I can roll back. And the way it can do the rollback is that it has an agent called conf D, which is really the reason why Cisco bought TailApp, was for that conf D, because it gave us network programmability and like this configuration management on anything with a hypervisor. So we could run this conf D agent on anything XC, NXOS, XR, kind of had it natively, I guess, with using netconf. But so now anything could listen to netconf and then make configuration changes. So I would send a configuration change via my NSO out to the conf D agent that's just a little container running on my ASR 1K, and then it would actually talk inside the box the command line changes that were needed to be made. And if you needed to roll back, you would make a rollback to that conf D agent, which is like kind of a subset of the database, and then it would make the CLI changes that were needed. It was a Band-Aid that we put in place to try to keep up with some of the other more forward-thinking vendors.
So is that available today? Or is that
Yeah, that's available today. It's very cheap from a system perspective. Where they get you is the drivers. So if you need a driver, then it's not there readily, don't do it. It's going to be tens of thousands of dollars because they have to write. So that's their revenue stream, is the drivers, not the system. So they get you in, they get you happy, and then you're like, oh, this is great. I wanted to control my ASA doing these other functions. Oh, that's not in the driver. We need to add that. That's going to be 50 grand or whatever. And that's where the revenue stream comes from for that. And it's not as fast as possible, but it's way faster than any other configuration management database. So you can make, they can develop driver code in days versus months, which is because it's all modular. I would definitely say look into it. I don't know how easily you can get to the code. I mean, I know that it's on DevNet, but I think that they kind of protect that. I mean, I have an account because I went to the NSO class. You have to go to the class first before they release the code. It's crazy, but maybe it's a little bit better now. I know NCS, the service, the system itself is readily available and was not necessarily open source, but openly available. But I think only drivers that come with it are like minimalist iOS and maybe iOS XR. They might have a Juniper one in there too. I don't know. We'd have to look. But that might be enough to kind of get what you need for your lab.
Okay, well, yeah, I know we're getting some Cisco here in the next few months, so we'll see. We'll see if it's permanent or it's going to stay in that one or not. So.
Yeah. Okay. I think that was a lot of talking.
So as you go with your infrastructure as code direction, at any point if you needed to, I don't know, fire hits your lab and boxes melt and then you have to restand up, basically your current YAML is, you just blast out there and that would completely recreate what you had with this kind of thing.
Yes, I mean, I try to keep it's not the best thing in the world, so I try to keep an infrastructure as code YAML, and then I'll have the service YAMLs too. So unfortunately, it's two places to keep your data. So you have the incremental updates that come from the Scrum teams, and they give me, here I want to deploy knowledge management or identity management, and these are the ports that I need or whatever. And so I have that in the repo, but then I also keep a complete config in YAML as well. So if I needed to start from scratch, I could just deploy that.
Right. But when somebody says, I just need this one extra service, you can't just pop that in over here and have him just kind of push and say, oh, all these things are already there, and I'll just add this one.
Well, it could, it would just be it would just take a long, long time.
Oh,
Yeah, because it's idempotent. If it's already there, it's not going to do anything. That's the beauty of the REST API, is that I'm going to do a get and see, what do you got? Do you already have the thing that I'm looking for? Okay, move on.
okay.
But that's time consuming.
So like each thing, it would have to do that check.
Yeah, so I've done that. It just takes like 20 minutes to deploy a full ASA config or a full NXOS config. Because it's running through a lot of different plays. And it's not that Ansible's slow, it's that the API is really slow. So,
The NX has got.
the NX API and the ASA API are very slow. I don't think they give a lot of,
It's not as slow as installing OpenStack, by the way, the hours
yeah, well, yeah, it depends on how you're deploying it, yeah. So for OpenStack, it depends if you're using it, your own Ansible modules, or if you're using them, yeah, DevStack, hey, it was up in 10 minutes. No, that doesn't matter, but for a real deployment, yeah, that's like half a day.
All of them have done most of them. All
Well,
of
yeah, I
them.
mean, you work with, yeah, you're a Marantz guy, you better know him. But, yeah, I mean, I think that you guys have actually probably one of the better with Fuel. And that's pretty nice. You know, that's why you guys make the big bucks for all those licensing.
It's interesting, it's good.
All right, well, yeah, it's still nice, we need that part. All right, well, if there's any more questions, go ahead and ask, and otherwise we can go and give my computer a break here.
Thank you.
So yeah, most of the stuff is on GitHub. I would encourage you to go and whatever, and there's a bunch of good blogs too. Jason writes a good blog. How do you call him the long name? Is it Patrick or Paul? I think it's Patrick. Writes a good one too. The network one.
So why would I use, let's say for Juniper, why would I use Napalm instead of NetMeepo?
NetMeepo is a subset of Napalm. Napalm uses NetMeepo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Which uses Paramiko, which uses some flavor of expect. I don't remember exactly.
Juniper had been big previously before Ansible got really big about coming up with their own automation stuff. So they actually already have a lot of things that were pre-done. That way, when Ansible did come around, they just kind of ported those over, right?
Yeah, I see that they
So-
have all like.
Yeah, so there's already a lot of the things that
Oh, I'm sorry.
Juniper did themselves that now have
Oh, yeah,
been
yeah,
ported
yeah.
over, or
Yeah,
Ansible, and then
yeah.
there's additional people that have started working
Yeah, I
on
can
Juniper
post. Yeah,
stuff.
it'll all
So
post it. Don't
really,
worry
I
about it.
mean, a few Google searches.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Oh, you're gonna post
it's all public information.
Juniper automation, Ansible.
So
You
yeah.
should start seeing Git repositories
Put
and
it on the
even
presentation, yeah.
actual.
I'm sorry.
The presentation, the full presentation, not slides, versus a lot. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
All
there's
this text
actually,
just go
I
live,
mean,
flash
even
through now.
actual
Yeah,
Juniper
it's
knowledge
Yeah,
base
nobody's saying about
on
that.
the Juniper site.
No, I mean, they don't have
Ansible
workshops,
and
not collecting any extra, like, they don't
So,
let,
I mean,
they don't let
there's-
them release like some of the
It's out there.
special extra sessions, things like, you want to capture and go to those.
Oh, it's not a tutorial.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's a workshop.
So yeah,
Here's the funny thing.
my video will be available.
Already at, so if you're already a Linux.
Not looking forward to that. I don't know how I'm gonna cram this in 45 minutes.
and you're comfortable.
That's gonna be a challenge.
Linux,
Yeah, I mean,
you're gonna
So-
pick up.
Because I wanted to be able to get people to
Because, I mean, it's
have time to run their own plays and things like that.
You know.
That's not good. So we're just gonna probably maybe do some interactive
Juno.
plays or anything like that.
yeah, I mean, well, you.
Because I had a choice. I could go to the big room and you have 50 people, or I could go to the living room with the 8 people. I'm like, oh, well, 8 people, they could all be, they all get their own Macs and they can do their own playbook, plays and stuff. I'd have to put a bunch of stuff on there ahead of time, but they just have to say go.
It's not very, it's very.
Yeah, it's a little difficult if you're gonna have,
So.
things you want to run locally, because you have to make sure they can either come with already installed, or.
Oh, they're Cisco laptops.
That's right, the.
For the DevNet,
the
whatever
DevNet,
that session, I don't know, lab. something?
Workbench, yeah.
Workbench, yeah.
But, yeah, that's true, so you can get them to pre-install whatever, so it's kind of all right.
Yeah, so I've already told them what libraries I want and what stuff I want them to grab and stuff like that.
Oh, so this is gonna be a workbench thing, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can see there'll be a challenge of squeezing in at the time.
Well, yeah,
Because I want people to ask questions. I don't want to be like, me talking and then, here's the end. That just seems really boring.
well, certainly you wouldn't do that for a workbench, you want that for like a big
Even
session.
a big session, yeah. It's boring to just listen to one person.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that probably would be helpful would be to think through, so not being an average engineer, or an Ansible person, or, I'd say that, like there's a couple different things going on that you're talking about simultaneously. One is sort of, I'm building my own Ansible modules, and here's how I sort of leverage that stuff, build more onto it, and design my own YAML files that have just the information I need to create my own plays that I wrote Python and whatever. There's the sort of, some guy in your lab has already done all that, and you're just trying to kind of run YAML, run these things, and build those YAML files that have some magic parameters that let you do these things, but hey, look how we can do that in sort of a production workflow kind of thing, right? Like, oh, this change order comes in, like, here's how it works, right? Change order comes in, we do this YAML, we validate that with whoever, and then, that YAML's here, we just run this command, and it goes and pushes that kind of stuff. So that sort of, I don't know, end user perspective, where it's like, forget about, why these particular YAML fields are there. It's just, look, we've kind of taken this big, instead of logging into these 6 boxes and typing these things, and then you've got this one little YAML file, you validate that, and then done, right? So that's just from it's changing your workflow from this to this. This is what kind of Ansible can do for you. That's sort of one piece of it. There's the other piece, which is sort of, okay, now you think all this is cool, but none of that was sort of out there, like you had to sort of build on top of things you can talk about.
Yeah, that's a nice idea.
That
So I
part
can
of
kind of
it.
tell the story of, hey, you got requested to add these commands, and then next week you were requested to add all these ACLs, and
Right.
kind of walk your, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I like that.
Right. So sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the cool things that I use infrastructure as code for, and my boss appreciates is now there's a audit trail of changes in the network.
Absolutely.
So now instead of going back and writing all these reports saying I did this, I
Right.
did that, it's all documented there.
Get
GitHub.
log, and there you go.
And it's like I just print out the GitHub log. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, that does, but there's also Git blame.
Right? So for me, it helps with auditing, and then also that thing of I'm writing less and less wikis of how I do things because it's all in Ansible. I document my tasks more, like when I create a new task or I create a new role, I document what that task and role does, and then I just use the Ansible command to basically list the tasks, and I print that out and make it nice and neat. I'm actually thinking of writing something to convert that into HTML, and then just that's my boss. Say, look, here's how the infrastructure works.
Yeah, I mean, you could take it to the extreme also is if you bought Tower. That's the only way Ansible makes money, so I'll throw it out there. I love Ansible, so I'll at least try to give that a thumbs up. Is that you can expose the plays without exposing any of the internals. And it would just be filling in the blanks effectively, and they would just run them.
Yeah. So, and for those of you who are cheap, like my boss, you can use a tool called RunDeck, which is what we are evaluating right now. That's exactly what Ansible Tower is going to pay for, at least for a small deployment like mine.
What's it called now?
RunDeck.
Rundeck?
Yes. Basically what it gives you is, and what it's going to give me is the ability for people to stop asking me questions like, hey, like when they're basically my users have the ability to create their own clouds within a certain defined parameter, and when you create a new OpenStack cloud, you need to assign a VLAN. They don't know what VLAN is. So they keep on asking me saying, hey, what VLAN can I assign for my new cloud? So what I want to use RunDeck for is RunDeck going to answer that question. So we'll go to run dev, have it do it, say, give me an available storage VLAN. It will go and search the infrastructure and see which VLANs are open and return back and say, these VLANs are open, pick one. I don't have to answer that question anymore. And it can do so much more than that. So it's basically like a big giant orchestrating tool that can use Ansible in the back end, whatever other configuration management tool, and whatever tools you have behind, and be able to now be sort of like a, the way I view it is sort of like delegating some of my job to the user that really I don't need to be involved with. Such questions like that, I didn't.
Yeah.
Red Hat is going to be open sourcing Tower
That's what
probably
they
this
say.
year. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm still waiting.
I think they kind of backed off. from
Because-
that.
because
And they
because
still
I was
say
making
they're
money
going to
after
open
it.
source it, but now they took the timeline off.
Because I was making money from what I heard.
Yeah. I mean, probably under that existing model of, do it yourself or small is free, and then you
Yeah.
really need help. then they charge.
That would be that's a way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
More for me to put. It's amazing that my bosses will spend millions upon millions of dollars on who knows what, but not the couple grand that would make everybody's life so much easier.
Yeah.
Well, this was fun. Appreciate everybody making the drive out. If there's any more questions, please ask, or just shoot a question on Meetup. I'll reply.
Okay.